This here's Lenore Zan, and you're watching Fandoms.
And welcome to Fandoms, a show from every fan's point of view. I am Tony, and as always, we are going to be talking about what you might love in whatever fandom you're in. Tonight specifically is Dungeons, Dragons, and Doctor. So we're going to be touching a little bit on Doctor Who, House of Dragons Season 2, as well as the updates to the 2024 rule books for Dungeons and Dragons. And we have some guests tonight. But before we get started, I just want to remind you, please be sure to subscribe to the Nerd Initiative YouTube channel, which I don't see anything showing up, which let me try that again. There we go. You can make sure you're subscribed to the new Nerd Initiative YouTube channel. There's consistent content coming out on the daily. So be sure to check us out there. And if you do subscribe, please make sure you like this video and also turn on notifications because you don't know what we're going to do next. Also, you can check us out on the merch store. Find just cool merch, Nerd Initiative branded stuff, whether it's cups, hats, shirts, whatever it might be, as well as stuff for maybe your favorite show. And then also you want to check out our website. The Nerd Initiative website has reviews of movies, comics, shows, and all different things, as well as if you want to watch this show on the website, it is currently streaming right now on the homepage. And then finally, just remember, new comic book day every Wednesday. The Nerd Initiative Bulletin just knocks it out of the park every week, talking about the latest in comic book reviews, comic book news, and you'll be sure to want to check them out. Now, tonight we have a guest with us, one of Nerd Initiative's own good buddy, Derek Hoskins, with us. And so I'm going to go ahead and bring him and Will on. Derek, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Will, welcome as always. William. Maybe he's frozen. I guess he's frozen.
He must be.
So we're going to be talking a little bit about different things. Will, if you can hear me, you may want to leave and come back. I don't know what's going on. Will's had an interesting week. I'm just going to say this. Wednesday we did the Deadpool. We did the road to Deadpool and Wolverine. We were talking X-Men Days of Future Past. Will had it says, "Give me a minute. It's broken." So Will had was on the show with us. I had Megan and of course La with us, and we were talking. And all of a sudden, Will's like, "I got to go check something out." Supposedly some neighbors were shooting out fireworks and scared the dog, and the dog just kind of pooped all over the carpet. And so he dealt with that while he was listening to us. And then yesterday, I'm sitting there waiting to get in on Netheads with him. And he's like, "We have a show tonight." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sitting here waiting." So he is busy. He's been busy with work, as well as you would know that too, Derek.
Yeah, absolutely. It is.
And since we're waiting for Will to get on real quick, something that's been amazing for you this year and something that you should be on everywhere talking about is a business opportunity that you now have. And if you are in the Indiana area, it's something that people should check out. So you could give us a little plug for it quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had the opportunity, my two best friends and I, who were actually in business with anyway. We run a business called Paperweight Entertainment. And we have a podcast, YouTube channel, and all that. And we had the opportunity to buy our local movie theater. The theater that we all met at, we've all been associated with it for over 20 years now. It had closed down for about 3 months. It just had been in some disrepair. The current owner lived out of state. And he gave us a call one day and said, "Hey, I'm not opening the theater back up. I can either liquidate everything or I can sell it to you. What do you guys want to do?" And it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. Now, since we've done that, I have not slept in the last 4 or 5 months, but it's been a lot of fun because like I said, it's the place that we grew up. I started
Mhm.
working there when I was 17 years old. I was an usher, a concessionist, a manager. I was a general manager of one of the theaters in the chain at the time. Both of my business partners, Bob and Ian, were also managers of the place, and so we just had a great opportunity, and we couldn't say no.
No, that's awesome. I like you told me right after you kind of like had the idea, and
Mhm.
you know, it's with something you have to kind of like, you talked about your family because it's like a very life changing thing. You
Right.
gotta pray about it and everything else, and of course you have an amazing, supportive family. But I was sitting there going, man, how do I get myself up to Indiana? Because I'll work for you. It's like it's just a neat idea because again, like the way you described it, and I mean, of course, I stalked it on the internet a little bit. You guys have got like a pretty substantial arcade there.
Yeah.
There's places for like parties and stuff, and like you're thinking about even like down the road, even setting up for maybe like being able to do like podcast recordings
Yeah, absolutely.
and different stuff. And if you are in the Indiana area, and this is the Madison 6,
Hmm.
and you're nearby and you don't know this, and I might be messing you up, and I apologize in advance. But you may have gone, if you think about having like a party or something like that, and you go to like AMC or Regal, and they charge a very substantial amount of money for you to rent out a theater to watch a movie. And then on top of that, you're limited by the number of people. You could have like an auditorium that can seat over 75 people, and
Hmm.
they'll only let you have 25 people. And then you have to like, if you're in the Madison area near Madison 6, I'm going to tell you right now, from what Derek's told me, I would rather go there to watch a movie or to rent out a theater than any of the other bigger places. And listen, I'm a big AMC popcorn bucket fan, and I go to
Right.
Regal a lot because that's what's nearby. But for a small place to be able to do that, and you're even talking like you can like hook things up to the projector, so it's not
Yeah.
just having to watch
Yeah, so
movies.
it's not just that, and Tony's right. We rent out the theaters at a really decent price. We do have a great arcade. We do birthday parties. We have an escape room as well, and it's a small theater. It's a 6-screen theater, and it's an older place. It's completely independent, so we can kind of set the prices that we want to, and so we can be a little more competitive, and we can be a little more open and accommodating to people. And so it's a great thing. It's really important for our community, um,
Mhm.
because there was nothing else. We live in a very small area. For those watching, Madison is a very small town. It's not huge. It's right next to Hanover, Indiana, where Hanover College. For anybody that knows, Woody Harrelson went to Hanover College, so it's that area in southern Indiana. And there just wasn't anything to do here. Everything had been closing down after COVID, and there was nothing for families to do, nothing for younger people to do. And it broke our hearts to drive past this building that was so important to us every day, and
Mhm.
see it just sitting there, not changing. The marquee was still had Night Swim from January, which, by the way, one of the worst movies ever made. um, yeah. Oh my. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, it was a great opportunity. It's definitely a labor of love. And if you are in the southern Indiana area or the northern Kentucky area, or even the southwestern Ohio area, come and check us out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you. I think one of the biggest things that I'm realizing, even like going like the conventions and stuff like that, people get enamored by big names and
Hmm.
like the big companies, but it's really going to be the small businesses and the local businesses that really are going to care more about the people. And just knowing that you guys are wanting to do this, and
Hmm.
like you guys are, I always see it because we're friends on Facebook. I see like it's either you or Allie that are posting the schedules for for the theater, and of course I'm liking it, but I don't know what I'm doing because Facebook, I don't know algorithms for that. But it's like it's one of those things where it's just, if you're in the Indiana area and you're near Madison, go the extra mile. Like go do it. Go support the small business. Um, the more you support them, the more cool stuff that they can do for their community, and also for those that patron, whether they're coming from a distance. So I know I didn't ask you to do that beforehand, but
Oh,
I
I will
figured,
plug
why
all day, every day. I have no problem with that. You're not bothering me
not?
any.
I think we've got Will back. Will, are you with us? Are you nod real? He's looking at me real quick, so let's go ahead and bring him back on. Hello, Will.
I have no
Hey.
idea. I don't know anything anymore. I don't know
Z
anything.
Z Z thought you were stoic, but that was next level stoic. Like you weren't moving at all. So
No, it was a nutty thing.
the very long story short is I have a 49-inch wide monitor. During the daytime, I do picture-in-picture. I split it in half, right? So half work, half mine, and the prompter that I use just did not like it. So once I got rid of work, everything was fine. Story of my life. Sorry.
Yeah. So I want to say this to our audience and anybody who was watching the Road to Deadpool and Wolverine last Wednesday. I have to apologize in advance because I was on bad information. And Nico, you're in the audience, so I'm going to say this to you directly because you were one of them. Will included. I was under the impression that the Legend of Ruby Rose was the last episode for the season. And so that cliffhanger I thought was going to be something I had to wait for a year to get to. And so on Wednesday, I made that comment, and Z was in the chat yesterday in Netheads, and I had made the confession that I had said on Wednesday that there was no new Doctor Who, which I apologize because there was. We're not going to talk specifics and we're not going to talk spoilers because Derek, being the busy entrepreneur that he is, has not seen this season, which I'm telling you right now, when you're able to, it's going to blow your mind. And honestly, it has been a fantastic season. Listen, I just finished. I'm with David Tennant. We just had what was it? Where do we go? The Agatha Christie episode.
Oh yeah.
Where that happened. And so I am of the mindset right now, because I've been through so many twists and turns with like the Master and with everything else. I would dare say that 2-part, season finale, because that's really what it was one of my favorites so far. And there are a couple things I can't quantify. I want to talk about later on down the road. But we'll wait when Derek's not here, so Derek can ignore us and put us on mute and whatnot.
We can talk about old Who all you want. We could talk about classic Doctor. I was telling Tony about stuff like that before we got on here. We can talk about everything up to Jodie Whittaker, because that's the last thing that I got to see. So
yeah, so
I'm like 4 seasons behind. I will catch up, I promise.
Well,
I will say this.
So sad that I'm so far behind.
So I'm
Go ahead,
Will. Go ahead, Will. I'm going to delay.
Special. So. I mean, I don't even understand how you can, how you weren't able to watch the return of David Tennant as the 14th Doctor.
I watched the first of the specials and loved it. I was so excited to see it. And then, like we said, I bought a theater and I haven't gotten to watch any of the other ones. So
what now? Because my connection was terrible, and I'm sorry to make you reiterate, but this is very exciting to me because, for example, in the small downtown movie theater that we have here in Brentwood, California, where I live, not O.J. Simpson Brentwood, it's in Northern California. We have a wonderful 2-screen, privately owned independent theater that just reopened. Got to see Inside Out 2 for Father's Day there. Failed to mention on my own program that I bawled my eyes out during one part of the movie. But I'm thoroughly love the concept of independently owned theaters. So can you just give me a brief breakdown of your movie theater again?
Yeah, so it's a 6-screen theater, and it's been we have 2 small independently owned theaters in the area where we live. One is a downtown second run theater called the Ohio. It's a historic site. It's a great old theater that they mostly do events at now. And so we're a first run theater that was independently owned before we bought it, but with somebody that lived out of state, and he's had some health problems and he's getting a little older and he's tired of owning these theaters. And so he was either going to liquidate it and just get rid of it because it had shut down for a few months, or he decided that he would get a hold of some people that loved it and see if we wanted to take over.
Gotcha.
And so, so it's an entirely independent theater. But it's all first run movies. We get people asking us that a lot of, oh, well, you're not AMC or Regal. Do you get first run or are you a second run theater? No. We get current movies. We're playing Inside Out. We just got The Exorcism, today opening up with Russell Crowe. So
what's also really cool is with the Madison 6, of course, because I stalk it. You think of like independent owned theaters as like these small auditoriums and whatnot. They're digital. They've got
Mhm.
3D capability.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a. And how many actual auditoriums do you have in the theater?
So we have 6 auditoriums,
Madison
all
6,
digital
yeah.
projection. Four of them are 3D. And like I said earlier, we've got a pretty state of the art arcade and an escape room along with it, and it's it's a modern thing, just an old building.
That's cool. That's so cool. Will, are you thinking about something? Or are you listening to something?
Hmm?
You just have this look in your eye, like you're. Are there more fireworks going off?
No.
Okay.
I'm just in my own world.
I was just boring him.
Are you
No,
watching
not at
Doctor
all.
Who?
No, I'm done with the episode.
So we were talking about Days of Future Past on Wednesday.
Hmm.
And before Will was inordinately interrupted and having to deal with crap, no pun intended, he kept looking over, and I realized, because he admitted it on screen, that he was watching the movie as we were talking about the movie. So every time you look over, I'm thinking you're watching the finale, you're finishing the finale, because that's
No,
what it
sir.
looks like. Okay. So fun thing with Doctor Who, I was telling this to Derek before you got on, Will. Talking about old Who here for just a second. I'm at the point where David Tennant's Doctor and Donna Noble went to the library planet.
Ah,
Silence
And
One of my
that's
of the
where,
favorite
that's where he
two-parters.
meets River Song for the first
Amazing.
time.
Hey, you
and
turned out
once again, Stephen Moffat.
Stephen
written
Moffat.
episodes, some of the best.
Some
And by
man.
the way, Derek, I just have to tell you, when you do finally take the few moments to steal this season away for yourself,
Yeah.
I will just say, well, first of all, he did write an episode, but also there are a lot of Moffat isms that play out in this season. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised and pleased at what Russell T Davies has learned while he's been away. And I can honestly say, too, thankfully, I think like 99% of the questions asked are answered by the end, which is just fantastic.
What
So
an
it's
exciting turn of
fantastic.
events.
Yeah, I know. So very, very shocked and surprised at how well Russell T Davies pulled it off. And I think even because I think there was one controversial episode from the entire season. And I'm sorry to go off on a tangent, but fresh in my mind. But there was one controversial episode, which in the long run ends up paying off as well. So it was part of if you're like, people watched it and they were like, I'm not sure why we had this story. The moment you said that, they should have realized, ho. So that's all I'll say. But a great season. But
I was actually going to bring that up.
Yeah, but Tony, I'm very envious. I've said this once and I'll say it again. I would love to rewatch those episodes again for the first time.
Yeah.
So you're in one of my favorite stories. And Tony, I will tell you, as you slip into the 11th Doctor's shoes, I will just say that River Song is a strong part of your future, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know. I mean, like I love how she kept just saying spoilers. Yep. And it was really one of those things where you were like, okay, first of all, on a mindset of like, okay, they're telling this story, they're now, since they first thought the show was going to not do well at the beginning, they've definitely put the effort in. You can tell it looks better. Even the whole the babies of fat, the whatever they were called,
adipose,
the adipose, yes. And so you could tell they put more into the actual production and the post-production for it. But the moment she's like, "You're the youngest I've ever seen you," I'm like, "Oh no."
Mm-hmm.
David Tennant's not long for this show.
No, that's not what that's actually not what it means, because
but I already know from you guys that they don't last more than usually 3 seasons.
Yeah,
so.
but that doesn't matter. That does not matter at all, sir. What matters is that this character of River Song, what you will learn is that he and she and the Doctor basically are, I don't want to say directly experience each other in almost opposite directions, but a lot of that does play out. So
And I'll also say, in all honesty, some of my favorite episodes, some of my all-time favorites, are River Song episodes. She's a phenomenal character.
my gosh.
Especially her last episode is that I've seen, because all I've seen up through is Peter Capaldi. So her last episode with Peter Capaldi, one of my all-time favorites.
Yes, it is.
Really,
As a matter of fact, I saw it. I'll tell you, Derek, I saw a clip because there are people that I don't understand how they get away with this, but all they do is grab clips of media and play them. And
Right.
there was just one brief moment where it was from that episode, and next thing I know, I had to find myself rewatching the entire thing.
Yeah,
it is absolutely wonderful.
I'm excited. I'm excited to hear more about this journey for you, Tony, because I've turned other people onto Doctor Who, and one of my favorite things is watching people realize how incredible this show is through even the ones that are questionable at best. There's still something to love about Doctor Who. And I was going to bring up, Will, because you talked about Russell T Davies. I was curious of how this season was going to go, because while I love Russell T Davies' early work that he did with Doctor Who, as he kept going, it steadily declined, in my opinion. So I was curious if he had learned anything from his, I won't say mistakes, but maybe some of the missteps that he had taken.
Definitely. At least from what we saw, even though, and a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but I'm sure there are some people that aren't happy that the new season is only 8 episodes. But when you factor in that we also got the 3 specials, we're not far off from a full season count. Plus, gosh, we got David Tennant back again.
Yeah.
But I will say, yes, I wouldn't even say he's just obviously evolved. And I really think that, his original tenure on Doctor Who thankfully happened because it brought the show back.
Right.
And yes, there are episodes that do hit and miss. And I feel like sometimes the narrative got away from him when he had an end goal in sight.
Right.
And and there was the frequency of what I felt of being having spectacle for spectacle's sake. None of that with this. I don't think there is a single episode I have not enjoyed in this new season, and that is something. Fantastic. And that is saying something. Even the one that when you get to it, because I know you'll hit it and you're like, oh, this must be the one.
Right? Are you talking about The Circle?
No, I'm not talking about The Circle. Am I? What do you mean The Circle?
The Fae Circle?
Huh?
The Fae Circle.
I still don't know what you're referring to.
The Woman at a Distance.
Yes, that's 73 yards.
They broke away. I'm a little minor spoiler. They broke a Fae Circle. That was the whole reason it all happened.
Why did you even? That's too much detail.
It's all right.
Much detail.
You know it at the beginning of the episode.
I haven't gone to bed before 2 a.m.
I go back and watch that episode.
I'm going to forget everything we talk about tonight. So it's
okay, good.
We're all good.
I actually really enjoyed that episode for what it was too, because the thing that a lot of people don't realize. Again, I'm attributing this fictional group of a lot of people, but Ncuti had shooting commitments still while they were shooting this season, so there were a few episodes that had to be Dr. Light. And in my opinion, some of those Dr. Light episodes turned out to be some of the real thinkers, or some of the real good ones. For example, Stephen Moffat's Blink again.
Blink's one of the greatest episodes of Doctor Who of all time, if not the best of all time. It's top 3.
And then
it's amazing.
Yeah, and actually one of the most I would say poignant in its message episodes this season, which was Dot and Bubble. It too actually was a Dr. Light episode, but it was done in such a way we didn't even realize it. So anyway,
at the same time, that episode after you're over with, you realize what was really going on. You kind of blew your mind what the real problem was in that episode.
Yeah.
So
came out.
No, I will say I really enjoyed a lot of it. I think the episode entitled Rogue gives us the best audio clip for any Doctor Who, I think, at this point. just cracks me up every time I hear it. If someone plays that clip on TikTok, I have to sit and watch it. And I'm at some point trying to figure out how to use that audio, for whatever purposes. But it's one of those things where I did not think I was gonna like this. We sat down on a Phantoms episode, and a group of guys, Tom, Nico, David, Will, all convinced me to give it a try. And what really turned me on is at first it reminded me a lot of like Smallville, and I was a big Smallville fan until it didn't, because the one thing Smallville didn't do well that this series, this genre does, is have Easter eggs throughout that really pay off.
Mhm.
The face of Ood, Bad Wolf, like
Mhm.
all of these things that just are peppered throughout, and you're like, okay, that's a coincidence. Like, no, it's not. It's the main story. You just don't know it yet.
Man, I wish I
So,
could go
love
back.
it.
Will, you made such a good point. I wish I could go back and learn who the face of Bo was one more time. Just the first. Gosh,
Oh, was
I
it?
wish
No,
I
it
could go
wasn't.
back.
Yeah, it was no.
I
They
wish
call
I
me
could
the
go
face
back
of
and get some of
Bo.
these.
Yeah.
It's like,
I was thinking about
son of a
Ood earlier,
gun.
because that episode kind of threw me off. That kind of caught me by surprise too. When you found out how the Ood are manufactured, I was like, oh man, that's terrible.
That's why I had to crack up when you were talking about, and I can't remember the name of the episode, but it was the traffic jam episode where they find themselves in this massive
Mhm.
traffic jam where people are living life cycles. And once they get it to the upper level, it's like, oh, and yeah, we saw that big face guy die. And I'm just like, the moment you said that, I'm like, I know what's coming. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
Come
because he's
on.
like the first. Because that was the first thing that that the doctor took Rose Tyler was, to the basically
The end of the
the
world.
world.
Yep.
And there he was. So and
Which,
and of
which,
course
which,
the last human in existence was there too, which
Moisturize me.
which I thought was a really great idea, but still just kind of really, in a way, seemed like they were really cribbing Douglas Adams, because really it felt like the moment you saw the scenario, it's like, oh, this is the restaurant at the end of the universe.
Mhm.
That's what this is.
well, Douglas
Anyway.
Adams was British too, wasn't he?
Yes, definitely.
Yep.
Like that's spot on. That's full on British humor. I think we're just trying to catch up. That's all it is.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. I
So,
want to go
okay.
back. Actually, I've kind of gone back and watched the whole season again already, so I guess there's not much I could do. But
Now-
I think we've driven the doctor into the ground, haven't we?
Yeah, we've already taken almost half the show just for the doctor, which is not
Which
a
is
bad
fine
thing at
by
all.
me, because I don't
Yeah.
know dick about Dungeons and Dragons, and I
Well-
haven't seen anything of the new season of I can't even remember the name of the show.
House of Dragon.
House of the Dragon.
I mean,
So-
Will,
so
that's
we're
all
not
right.
gonna-
If
we're
it
not
makes you
gonna
feel
talk-
better, I've not
The-
seen a single episode of Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. Again,
Um,
I was told we were talking D&D, so I came here with a smile on my face. Tony
So-
lied to me.
We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there quick because we're gonna
I'm
run
kidding,
through the next
I'm
part. But I
kidding,
will
I'm
say this,
kidding.
Derek, being a person who's watched every episode of Game of Thrones, don't start.
Don't start.
Yeah, it's true, because
Because
it
as
just
good as it
gets
starts off, it is worse than the ending of Smallville in any sort of way. Like it's
Here's what you do. If you
stop
do
it-
ever
you're
if
gonna
you
start,
ever
stop
want to
at
get
season 3 or
into
4.
pardon me, if you ever want to get into Game of Thrones, just watch it up to the point where R.R. Martin, good old George, has stopped writing for the
Right.
last bit we saw. Watch up until that point, and then just like, all right, we'll set this aside. Somebody else will then do it better once,
Mhm.
hopefully, he comes out with the rest of the story. And then somebody will adapt it, or HBO will like, let's do a reboot. And then
Now-
we'll get the episodes that we deserved.
Yeah.
Right.
Or we got the
So-
ones we deserved, which is a sad, sad tale of humanity.
So we're going to go ahead and move on. We're going to try to get through this real quick, because we want to get into the Dungeons and Dragons update. So Will can be at a loss here. But yes, so season 2 of the House of the Dragon did premiere on. Oh, that's the wrong thing. What am I doing?
That looks like Dungeons and
that looked
Dragons to
D&D.
me.
Yeah, it is. There we go. House of the Dragon premiered on Max and on HBO, I believe. this Sunday. And so one of the cool things about this season has not been so much the episodes that have the episode that came out so far, but the marketing. Now, I don't know if you guys saw this, that like DC was doing the House of L and the House like the House of Wayne. They were choosing their sides. So you had a lot of Warner Brothers like specific content that was choosing that. And then of course, on the Empire State Building, we have a dragon promoting the show,
Well,
which
plus the
is actually
flags
pretty
hanging
phenomenal.
on bridges.
Oh yeah, there were banners on bridges and everything, I believe. So absolutely love the marketing. Hopefully they just don't mess up and they don't go the way of Game of Thrones when it comes to how they continue their stories or finish their stories. But with that said, we're done with the dragons. Now let's get to Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, my hardest thing, because for those that have read the stories, there is there's something that happens in the first episode, and I know what it happens. And all I will say is, for the longest time, I did not watch HBO's The Last of Us.
Mm-hmm.
And mind you, I'd never played the video games. And I heard how great the show was. But I have the hardest problem when, especially since I became a father, with the death of children in entertainment. So much so, I watched, as it aired, the premiere of Battlestar Galactica. And the moment that Six, I'll just say, stops a baby from crying, I was like, that's it. Nope. And then the critics were ranting and raving. And I'm like, okay, well, I've seen that. I can get beyond it now.
Right.
Yeah, it really affects me. And so, like, that's part of the reason why I have not delved into this first episode of the season, because there's something that happens, and we'll just leave it at that.
It's the same. That same thing happened to me, Will, because I did play The Last of Us, and so I honestly didn't want to watch the show because I knew what was coming and what was going to happen at the very beginning of that show. Because I already had to live through it in the video game, and that was bad enough.
Right.
And my co-host on Paperweight Entertainment really wanted to cover it, and so I was like, all right, fine, we'll cover it. I'll watch it. Fine, I'll watch it. It'll be fine. And man, I just had to relive that all over again. And there is something about when you become a father that those types of scenes get harder and harder to deal with. So yeah,
if you haven't watched it, and odds are you probably won't ever watch it, so I'm just going to say this: the moment that hit me for the first time was a couple years ago, right after my kid was born. The movie was The ABCs of Horror. And there's one where it's a break-in, and the husband is on the phone, and he hears his wife being taken out, and then you hear like him talking to the killer, and then all of a sudden the baby starts to cry, and the guy goes, "Hold on." And I lost it. I'm weeping at a horror film, but not for the reason that you would think. So I completely understand that. And so then that's the same thing. Like I'm learning that I'd be more careful, like with trigger warnings and stuff, because even like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, for people that are very sensitive to animals and animal cruelty, that is a very big trigger. And though it does add for gravity to a story, you got to tread with caution. So I appreciate you letting me know about that. So this week, Wizards of the Coast went on live stream and was talking about the we're currently in the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons being a game which is a core rule book and and a fantasy gameplay that has been in existence for over 40 years. We're talking about multiple generations that have been doing this. Some people, there's a guy who's been doing a Dungeons and Dragons campaign with people for 40 years, to the point of where when his daughter brought a boyfriend over and he wanted to play, he had to sit down and talk to her and say, listen, if your relationship goes bad, I'm not cutting him off because he's part of the story. And so she had to understand that. And of course, when the relationship ended, they kept going. And so this has been a big thing. And of course, we've talked about it, Derek and I, when we were in Chicago, about, how there's a lot of mentalities against Dungeons and Dragons because it's just not properly understood. It's a role play game. It's a lot of math and fantasy, and it's very much a rule book to make whatever world you want to play in.
Mhm.
And so the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons came out in 2014, and it's now 10 years. And I think a lot of people were thinking that we were going to get a 6th edition or at least a 5.5 edition. But what it seems like Wizards of the Coast now is doing is they're going to be starting to do, I guess, year iterations. And so this is the 2024 iteration of the 5th edition. And I think someone was even talking like they're projecting to maybe do a 2034, but maybe sooner if it all goes well. But this announcement for a new player's handbook, a dungeon master's guide, and the monster manual helps to elaborate and kind of bring in some things that have been homebrew for a while. Things like drinking of potions and things like that, which normally would have taken a full turn. They're now capable to be a bonus action. They're elaborating the subclasses of the different races so that it's a little bit more balanced, because in some cases, like the barbarian only had 2 subclasses, whereas the wizards had like 8 different subclasses. And so there's a lot of different things that they're adding also with the manual. From what you've seen, Derek, what are your thoughts so far?
I think this is something that needed to happen pretty desperately, because 5e, I knew they weren't going to come out with a 6th edition for the simple fact that they got a bigger boost during 5th edition than they have in any previous edition. Things like Stranger Things, the D&D movie, Critical Role, Dimension 20, it's gotten much more popular online.
Not to mention, I think that there are, because I can speak as a person that's completely outside of this. We also find out that like some of the cool people that we want to maybe be, they play and love D&D. I mean, I'm not saying I want to be Joe Manganiello. I can't say his name right. But I mean, he loves D&D, right? And you look at this guy and you're like, no way. He was a werewolf on a TV show. There's no way this dude plays D&D. Oh, wait a minute. That kind of adds up. But you know, there are lots of celebrities that straight up play this game. So it is definitely not what we typically perceive it as, which a lot of people, I think, if you've seen the fourth season of Stranger Things, if you've seen the 4th season, that like was the early perception of it. And definitely, but you know,
yeah, Tony and I talked a lot about that, because Stranger Things season 4 did a good job of showing an over the top version of the satanic panic that was happening during that time. But that has really made its way forward even to this day, where people still don't know what it is. I joke that my mother, who is not an overly religious person in any way, shape, or form, doesn't care about any of that. I told her I was going to start playing D&D, and her only words to me were, be careful. It's a game. What am I being careful of? I'm an adult. Either way. I mean, but to your point, Will, the fact that not only is it becoming more popularized just in general online, people are more open to the fact that they like these games. And it's not just D&D. Look at Henry Cavill. He will nerd out about Warhammer 40K for an hour and a half if an interviewer will let him. People are being allowed to openly enjoy the things and the hobbies that they used to not be allowed to. We got to see that start with comic books, when comic book movies, the boom started to happen in the early 2000s, where, oh, wait a minute, comic books aren't just for nerds that nobody likes anymore. And that has shifted into other formerly socially unacceptable hobbies. And it's been a really big thing.
Well, and the other thing too that I don't think some people may realize is that they may be working or playing with things that have been influenced by the concepts that D&D brought. You know, being able to roll for this or roll with that translates even into this day. People that play Fortnite, for example, when you are shooting at an enemy, there's one thing that you've got going for you, which is your aim. But like, let's say you're using something like a rifle, and that it's like a machine gun. It's firing off multiple bullets. When it does that, the mechanics of the game are doing a random roll itself as well to say whether that bullet will shoot true or not, or how much recoil you're going to experience. So there are a lot of things that D&D brought to the table, no pun intended, that have played out now in lots of other media.
Well, I think that's the thing. Like if anything, what I think people need to realize, and this is something that I've come to, because again, ministry background, very similar, I think, with Derek. Like it's kind of funny. I feel like we're two faces of the same coin a lot of times, Derek. And it's one of those things where there was this perception, and let's go back a little bit farther before we even talk about D&D. Comic books were under a very similar type, not so much satanic panic, but there was this this concern about gore, blood, and violence. And so the Comics Code Authority came out. You have, I mean, even as of recent, even after Dungeons and Dragons, people were so focused on making sure there were ratings on video games because they were convinced that children playing Sonic the Hedgehog was causing them to be more violent, and they were going to stomp on their siblings' heads. Or, unfortunately, the one thing that did seem to influence was when kids were watching Beavis and Butthead and they decided to throw a bowling ball over a bridge or something. So you have this idea that art and media influences people to an extent, and there's got to be an understanding. What I have learned from just delving into wanting to try to DM my own party and everything else is it's very much a story based platform. Dungeons and Dragons is a platform.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like you getting the Sega Genesis and then you have to program the game. It's very much that. You can take as much of what they provide for you in those manuals or none of it at all. But the mechanics are true blue. I mean, you think about hit points and you think about, different types of attributes that different characters have, and different power sets, even with things that have come out after that, Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, all this other stuff. There's very much this based on it's a mechanics based. It's very much a analog console to whatever story you're willing to play and tell. And it could be a story that happens in one night, or it could be one that happens for 40 years, but it's very much whatever you make it. And there are people who do Dungeons and Dragons campaigns. They're like, oh, we're going to do a Christian version. That's how it was designed. You can do, the religious side, or you can do, this side, or you can incorporate evil things if you want to, but that's not what it's imposing on you. It's whatever you make the story to be.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And that's the hardest thing. I'll get back to your actual question at some point here in a moment, but one of the hardest things to explain to a new player, because when I started the campaign, just my home campaign here with my, a couple of people, my wife, my daughter, and a couple of friends, they had never played anything. I had never played, but I had an understanding that you don't really know how to play until you just sit down to play, because it is just a system. It's not like a board game where you have set rules and instructions and I do this and then you do this and then you do this. No, we're going to tell a story together. We're going to have a whole adventure that's just based around this rule set and this bit of game mechanics. And it's a good point that people don't realize when they're first getting into it, that this is going to be something that is going to take different forms and different games. The game that I run here is not like the game that I play every other week online with a group of people. They're the same mechanics. It's the same idea, but there's a different DM. That DM does things a little differently than I would. This DM over here will do things a little differently than I would. Maybe these players over here aren't as into the RP aspect of it, and they're just kind of there to roll the dice and see what happens. And over here, it's a really RP heavy campaign, and that's what's so great about this entire system, is that it can really be whatever you want it to be. And I think that's why, again, to get back to the original question, why I think that they needed to revise what they did, or what they seem like they're going to be revising. This isn't just we're going to start from scratch. We're going to do a whole new edition. We're going to take what worked. We're going to take what didn't work, and we're going to see if we can kind of mix things up a little bit. What are you guys doing in your homebrew games? And what are you doing in your own house rules that are really working and that a lot of people like? And we're going to take that and we're going to make that an official part of the game so everybody can enjoy it. But at the same time, if you don't like that part, chuck it out the window. Nobody from Wizards of the Coast is sitting in your room with you when you're playing a D&D game and saying, hey, that's not the rules. You're not allowed to do that. No, do whatever. As long as you're following the basic guidelines and the mechanics of the game, you're playing D&D the way that you want to play it. That's what makes it such a great game.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like a lot of media I think of today are heavily influenced. You can't watch a fantasy anime show, movie, and not see some type of influence from D&D.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things where it's okay. You'll be all right. Like it's not dangerous, it's not scary. A lot of people always say, well, I know somebody who was in it and they were a terrible person. Well, yeah, there are lots of terrible people who play D&D, just like there are a lot of good people. And
Yes,
there's
just
a
like
lot of
with
terrible
the
people that do
You could have just said there's lots of terrible people.
yeah, they're just terrible.
Yeah.
It's like you were talking about comic books, and it was that whole idea of the corruption of the innocent, and
Mhm.
what was thought that these all these kids that are childhood delinquents read comic books. Well, they also all eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So which one is it that's making them be delinquent? Is it the comics? Is the like you can't just because a lot of people are doing something doesn't mean that's the issue that's at hand. It's such a
let me
silly
tell you
thought.
something, Derek. Breathing oxygen leads to meth addiction. Okay, I have empirical evidence that backs this up.
That is
Because every meth addicted person breathed oxygen.
That
Every
is
one
the
of them.
kind of argument that I would not be surprised to hear from a certain group of people in this country. That's a real dystopian look into our future there, Will.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Or within the Christian circles, like it always leads to beer. That's the big bad, So regardless, I mean, it's one of those things where I'll be honest with you. Like I was telling Derek before we started, one of the things that I've noticed, and I've done, and this is because you called me out, Will, on TikTok, because I was talking about how I'm getting obsessed with it.
Oh.
And Will's like, how many games have you played? And
Well,
I'm like,
because, dude, how many dice do you have? And
it's a slippery slope.
And you have yet to roll them.
Dice Goblin is born.
And let me tell you something, Derek. Even worse is that very soon I'm going to be sending this dude a resin printer. So he's going to start making figures for campaigns as well.
I mean, to be
I've
fair,
already
the 2 resin printers that I have, that's all I use them for. But I do a game at home. I actually have a home game that I need them for. Tony's just obsessed. He hasn't started yet.
Okay, let me just say this. Now there is a point where like there is like a craft fair, so I am going to be selling stuff for people but I literally I have 16 different condition rings, and I've probably made 32 copies of each of the conditions. Like I've got like a bin just full of condition rings.
What's
I've
a
got
condition
initiative
ring?
track. So in the game, when you're playing, you let's say the bad guy throws a net on you and you're grappled. Okay. Because you're grappled, you can't do a normal attack. All you can do is either focus on ungrappling yourself, getting out of the net or whatever. And so that's a condition that prevents you from doing like an action or an attack. And so condition rings just help you remember who's in what condition. So they could be blinded, they could be restrained, they could be frightened, they could be poisoned or prone or whatever it is. Of course, the easiest way if you're prone is just put the figure on its back. So the rings just put on there to remind the player that they are in a condition that they have to address before they continue on in the game. So
fair enough. Okay.
Yeah,
I
and they're
understand that.
great. They're great. They're really fun trinkets that I've never used in a game. But they are cool. They are really neat. I've never used them though. I was just write it down.
So Tony, I guess I have to ask then, have you either 3D printed or scoped out 3D printing like some of the dice rolling towers where you drop the dice in it and it will go through the tower and then come out?
He printed the dice tower. He printed a huge dice tower. That's also a dice holder.
That is not a dice tower. That, sir, is
it's a dice Coliseum.
Yeah, exactly.
It's my little fortress of dicity.
It is cool. I won't lie. After I saw that you printed that off, I may or may not have downloaded that file because that's a pretty cool thing. I'm not gonna lie.
And it's free. If you're a 3D printer and you haven't gotten into Dungeons and Dragons, just understand that if you get into Dungeons and Dragons, listen, I have dragons printed. I have tons of barrels, just little miniature. And here's the thing: my mom is a huge miniature collector. She had the doll houses, and then of course I ended up going down the slippery slope of getting like little miniature teddy bears. And so as I am building miniature stuff, like I did that tavern, there's a lot of furniture that goes into it. I have to make multiple furniture because I'm making it for her and then I'm making it for me. And as much as I don't think I'll ever use some of this stuff in the game, I'm glad I have it because it fills a void of wanting to make something. And
Well, and all jokes
so,
aside, you never know when you might need it. Like I can't tell you, I was playing the Wizards of the Coast this last year put out a great little one shot for beginning level players, including like children 5 and up. And so it's a great little one shot for kids. And I kept telling my kids, hey, we're going to play. Because my oldest plays with us. But, my youngest that would be playing is 6 and he can't really, he can't do the math yet. There's a lot that goes into it. This is a really dumbed down version, very much for brand new players and children. And so I was like, all right, fine. I've got an evening free. We're going to do this. And I'm looking around like, I got no miniatures. I got no map. I'm going to have to draw my own map because when I play with my group, I built a table with a TV in it. So I've got everything digital and then
that's
minis on top of it that I can use, but I don't have to have all the miniatures. I can have just the monsters and the players and that's it.
And that's what Tony is aspiring to, correct?
Yeah.
okay. Yes.
Yeah. You're working on that too, aren't you? It's great, by the way.
Oh yeah. It's cool because I've got a TV over here that I realize I can use, so I don't have to like spend too much money, and I'll just connect it. And then of course with like all the Arzopa monitors, I have lots of extra digital, ways to display different things. But I'll tell you, now that I'm on that side of TikTok too, there are some people that have done some amazing things. Do you know how sad it is that because of Dungeons and Dragons, I don't have a reptile, but I want a reptile mister now so that I can cause fog on the table.
Just Tony, just get an animated map, my guy. There's pretend fog. It's already on there.
No.
Just
Listen,
hit up Patreon, get some animated maps. I'm telling you, easy button's the way to go. For anybody that's getting into D&D, you don't have to have all these things. These things are cool, and I'm not getting on to Tony about it because these things are awesome and they're a lot of fun. But one big thing that I've seen where people have been really concerned about whether they can do this is, hey, I don't have the money to buy maps. I don't have money to make a table. I don't have money to do all. You don't need any of it. You can do it all. Theater of the Mind. You can do it all. The one shot we played in C2E2 was a Theater of the Mind one shot. We had a great DM. He did a wonderful job. He drew out a quick map on a sheet of paper so we knew what we were doing. You don't need any of that stuff. This stuff is fun and this is awesome. And if you have the means, by all means do it. But D&D can be anything you want. I've seen wonderful people go to the Dollar Tree and grab some tokens and grab some little crafty things and make it just everything you need right there so you can keep with it. So as amazing as these things are, I want to make sure that if you've never played D&D and you think that there's some big barrier to entry, there's really not. You can get a free starter, like a dumbed down version. I keep saying dumbed down. It's not dumb by any means, but a free smaller version of like the core rule set, and just go to town, make up a story. You don't have to spend a bunch of money on D&D. Wizards of the Coast wants you to spend a lot of money on D&D, but you don't have to.
Yeah. And here's the thing though, that's a great point. But also if you go on to dndbeyond.com or you download the app, first of all, that'll help you build your character. So you've already got that part out of the way. And then on top of that, there are glossaries within the app that you can go that are absolutely free. And then on top of that, there is the core rulebook right there that's free to use as well. You don't need to go buy it. So, and honestly, if you are going to buy the core, the manuals and stuff, get them digital, because then you can put them on your iPad or whatever else. It's definitely something that I would say I don't have to do all of this stuff. If I could recommend one thing, it's get one of these.
Yeah. Just
and
a notebook.
That's because I'll tell you right now, just writing out like my ideas and my thoughts, it's exciting because it makes me think, oh, there you go. So that's really what
I have two, but I don't have it next to me. I was going to put it up, but also just a note. I did want to bring up Z in the chat said D&D is something that I wish I experienced early. Me too. I never did.
Yeah.
Like I didn't start playing D&D until last year. And it's something that I always wanted to, but I was never able to start doing it. Like I never had anybody that I could play with. I didn't have a group. You know, I live in a very small kind of rural area. We don't have a lot of places where you can go if you don't already have a group of people set up. And so I finally just said, screw it. And I bought a starter set and I was like, all right, my wife and daughter will play. I got 2 friends that are interested. Boom, we're going to start.
Well, you know, I'd also imagine that if the pandemic taught us anything, it's that we don't have to be in the same room to do something.
Yeah.
And I would also imagine with the way technology is and the way you're speaking about how you can use tech as well, I could really see people integrating a D&D experience into like Zoom and the like very easily.
Oh,
yeah, they're very
yes.
popular. I play on a Roll20, which is one of the more popular virtual tabletops. The VTTs, there are so many of them. The game that I'm a player in, my DM is in Florida. One of the players is, or 2 of the players are in Oklahoma. One is in, another one of the players is in Florida. One of the other players is in Indianapolis. So we're from all over. And these virtual tabletops, COVID really brought together the D&D community to innovate and make it more open and accessible to anyone. Right now, you can get onto Roll20, or you can get onto Shard, or you can get onto Foundry, and you can just type in D&D into a search and find a free game that needs a player, and you can jump right on board. It's a great thing.
Not to mention the entertainment that it has spawned. I was extremely shocked, and we already mentioned them once, but I was coming back from a business trip, flying from Seattle back to Sacramento, I believe. And there was the person sitting next to me, very full flight. So somebody was stuck in the middle seat, and I was almost dreading the experience. Thankfully, I had media loaded on my laptop or on my iPad, same one you just saw. So I was excited. But I kid you not, the girl next to me spent the entire time on her phone watching a downloaded episode of Dimension 20 that I think she got because she was a Patreon supporter as well. And man, I'll tell you what, the way she was chuckling, clearly they were having fun and she was having fun.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's been a big thing. I know a lot of people credit Stranger Things with the big reason why there's been a boom in D&D, but I think that opened the floodgates. But actual plays like Critical Role and Dimension 20 are what really have shown people what this game can be. Because granted, now, is that going to be the same kind of game that you're going to have? Of course not. I'm not a professional voice actor. I can't do the things that these people do. I don't have a budget of hundreds of thousands of dollars to put together incredible miniatures and all that. But you can see the fun that happens at a table with very funny people. It's very entertaining. And I know people that watch actual plays that will never play a game of D&D, but they just really enjoy what they're seeing because it's a fun story told by, entertaining people.
You know, my perception may be off, but I have to say, I think that D&D surfacing in pop culture and becoming more perceived on social media and pop culture, personally, just from my perception, I almost attributed it to Felicia Day's short web series of the Guild, even though that was more of a EverQuest type gameplay group. But even then, EverQuest, where do you think those concepts come from?
Yeah,
Again,
EverQuest,
D&D.
World of Warcraft, all those stemmed from D&D.
Yep. And I think that's the thing. Like, and it doesn't have to be an expensive hobby. It doesn't have to be an expensive experience, like you said. And then at the same time, there are still things like. I went into a game store. I was given some money for Father's Day. I went into a game store. Of course, I'm going to spend money on my new obsession. I don't know what Marvel is anymore, and so we're in this section. I'm looking, and the miniatures are not expensive. Like, they're not. If you are going to, if you want to go to like Joann Fabrics or Michaels or Hobby Lobby and buy some acrylic paint, and you go and you get some of these already primed miniatures, I think I bought a Zombie Beyonder that was like $8.99. That's the most expensive until you start buying the big dragons, which I would say then just buy a 3D printer.
Oh, Tony!
But like even the little miniatures are like $4.99. I'm telling you, I already have a backlog of stuff that I want to print.
All right. So, yeah. What you will make from a $30 bottle of resin, you will be amazed.
Yeah. I wish I just put all of my stuff away because I had all of my minis out here. I'm reorganizing my workspace. I wish I had some so I could show off those resin printers, and you can get so many great things on there. You think You think those mimics look cool and the Beyonders look cool that you can buy? Oh, just make some of those awesome ones. People have designed some really cool.
Oh,
cool
no, look,
designs.
I mean, look, so they're not painted. I got a little bit of them here. So here's a barrel mimic. You
Mhm.
can't really see it. 'Cause there you go.
Yeah.
And then there's the regular mimic.
Yep.
And so I made a bunch because I'm going to try to sell some too. But
I'm glad you explained what
it's
those
crazy.
were, because from my perception, it looked like you just had a bin of human teeth or
well,
other
what do you
animals.
think I make them out of?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But another thing, the reason why it's so great, and another reason why I brought up that you don't have to have a lot of money, because the miniatures aren't overly expensive, but if you're on a shoestring budget,
Mm-hmm.
it breeds creativity. And that's just another
Yeah.
great thing about it, is that this is a hobby that breeds creativity. This isn't a hobby that makes you just sit down and veg out. It makes you think. It capitalizes on critical thinking, on just basic math skills that you may not do in your everyday life normally, and also just as a way of creatively figuring out, how am I going to make this work? How am I going to get this map to look good? How am I going to get my players to visualize what they want? What story do I want to tell? It's a great creative medium, and it's a wonderful hobby to get into. And I would say, I know a lot of people, like Z had mentioned in the chat, I wish I would have gotten into it younger. I think it's great to get into this in your, I'm almost 40 and I'm just now getting into it. I'm glad. I'm sorry, Will.
No, I was just going to say that, if you're using things like Wordle or connections to expand your mind, from what I remember in the 2 campaigns that I took part in, I mean, realistically speaking, I felt like my mind had as much of an exercise as it does reading a good book.
Yeah.
So, I would, and the old adage is always true. You are never too old to start something new. I mean, granted, I'm not going to become an Olympic wrestler at 53, but I could at least strive for it.
Yeah.
You were almost taken out by a corgi. I don't think you're going to be,
No, dude, I was almost taken out by myself chasing after a corgi. That's the sad part.
But that's a great thing. Like I'm a little bit older than Derek. I'm 41 years old, and so it's been one of those things where it's like, yeah, I mean, what would have been really cool is when we went to Chicago, and Felix, by the way, shout out to roughmagicgames.com.
Yeah.
And to Felix, like, they're an amazing group, and the pandemic did great for them because they were going to try to do in-person things like finding spaces, and because of the pandemic, they just went everything virtual. So they were just stockpiling money to be able to then do what they needed to do once the pandemic was over. And if you're wanting to, I was looking on their site just now, they'll do like $15 a game, and you can do like a campaign with them, and they'll have a DM, and you guys can, do whatever. And they're amazing, roughmagicgames.com. But at the same time, like sitting there watching Felix, I'm thinking, this guy is so much younger than me, and he's got a wealth of stories in him. And then from what they were doing, and realizing just how, I think the only thing that I long for is that missed opportunity of those stories that I could have been a part of. And I don't begrudge, because I feel like I'm in a place now where, like, I can set things up. And then when my son's a little bit older, like, if he wants to get into it, then that's fine. But it's really kind of seeing what happens next and being able to do, what makes you happy. And I'm not angry that I had all of that time, other than I felt stupid because, when you're a part of like a Christian community and the narrative is like, oh, it's evil, you got to get past that, and you got to break down some things that were just not healthy. And honestly, I'm glad I'm in this now, and I'm glad that I was able to bond with Derek and Mickey, because they were there holding well, not really holding my hand, but they were figuratively holding my hand. Every so often we'd be doing something, I look at Derek, I'm like, what do I do next? And he's like, you look at this on here, and thank God for things like, D&D Beyond and everything else to make it easier.
Yeah. Plus, if not for D&D, we wouldn't have 2 of the most entertaining episodes of Community that ever existed.
Or even some fun moments in Big Bang Theory. I'm a huge Big Bang Theory fan, and they leaned into it a lot too.
Never watched an episode, not a single one.
Goodbye, Will.
Goodbye. Just call me Hector the Well Endowed. That's a Community reference. That was what Annie Edelson's character was in the thing. Anyway, sorry.
That's okay. So but yeah, I mean, so just to kind of like, so we can stay on topic a little bit more. So what they're doing is they've added 46 different subclasses to be more balanced with all of the characters. There's over 400, I believe it was, spells and potions that they're adding to the player's handbook, and they're trying to make it more functional so that it's easier to reference things, because unfortunately when you are playing the game, if you're playing more to the rules and trying to keep things up, especially if you're new, you will reference the books and you will reference the material, at least the core rule book at some points. But like, they've also added, what was really interesting, they've added weapon mastery, which they kept describing it, but they didn't actually describe it. But they just said that for people that are more into playing with weaponry and actually like more brute fighting, that there's actually points where you can master a certain weapon, and it gives you additional, even if you miss, you can actually, land hits with the creatures. And of course they're going, I think is this one? Yeah. And so they're actually in the handbook giving examples of scenarios. I think someone said in an article that it's very familiar to a very old D&D campaign from what they've read. But at least shows you how it looks, because honestly, one of the biggest things, and I know this from before even getting the D&D, the Marvel Multiverse multiplayer game that they came out, and they now have the core rule book for. When you sit there and read it, if you're sitting there and reading it, it's not going to help you. You have to observe it. You have to actually experience it. So if you're wondering how to get into D&D and why it's all confusing, go find somebody, tell them you're new, and let them sit in on a one shot or one of the sessions of their campaign, and you'll get it very quickly. I can tell you, I've only done one actual campaign or one actual one shot, and it's helped a lot, and I feel a little less stupid talking to Derek.
Yeah, it really is much easier to just watch it being played. And if you're somewhere that, like I said, if you're somewhere where you don't have a game store, or you don't have a group of people that are willing to do this, watch Critical Role or Dimension 20, watch an actual play. Those things are every bit as educational as they are entertaining. I learned so much from watching a season of Dimension 20, more than I would have learned by reading through any of the rule books or the core rule books. Now, like Tony said, you'll have to make references, you'll have to figure things out, but it's so much easier just to learn by observing what's actually happening. If you just sit down and read, you're going to get confused and you're not going to really understand what's going on. But it's worth it. It's worth it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I will say that I sat down and I was reading the book, and it wasn't until I came back from Chicago where I was like, oh, this makes so much more sense now. And it's like, there's still stuff that I need to learn. Like, at some point on Nerd Initiative, we're going to be doing a campaign or a one shot. And Derek was giving me specifics about what I needed to know. And I was constantly messaging him on Discord, like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And of course, I just didn't read what he said before. And so, I learned a lot, even just by creating another character, because when we did the one shot in Chicago, they were pre-designed characters unless you already had one. And so I used one of the pre-made characters. But yeah, I would just say, like, if you're interested in getting into the game, be on the lookout. We're going to be doing some more content about it. We'll definitely be on talking more about it in the future. Derek, you're going to have to come back. I know everything kind of aligned perfectly tonight for you to be with us because of
really
games did. And because at first I'm like, he's not going to get on. He's humoring me. I'm going to ask like for an update. He's like, oh no, it worked out. I'm like, yes. So I'm absolutely happy. And of course, Allie, thank you for being in the chat. Actually, jumping in and saying stuff. Again, supportive family right there.
Yeah.
And of course, my wife is texting me pictures of us talking. So we got a couple good ones there. But yeah, is there anything else we want to say before we get off? Because we've already gone well over an hour.
Honey, I love you. Don't be mad. I'm still in here.
We'll blame it on
All
Tony.
right.
It's Tony's fault.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that said, just please remember, just Make sure you subscribe to the Nerd Initiative YouTube channel, right across Will's face right there. You can also check out our merch store. New Comic Book Day is on Wednesday, and you get those reviews right there. And of course, you'll check out the website because we're also streaming on there right now until we shut off. But with that said, I am Tony. With us again, Derek from Paperweight Entertainment. Be sure to check out Madison 6 if you're in the Indiana area. I know they would appreciate it, and I'm pretty sure you're going to have a good time if you go. And of course, you can always check out Will Wilkins on Netheads on Thursday nights. It's either with Trent or with me, which again, I'm just biding time until he gets sick of me. But with that said, everyone have a wonderful evening.